So not only do we need God as co-creators, but we need each other. I've heard it said we're all angels with just one wing. And we need each other to fly. So today's topic is the common thread of unity, the thread of unity. We know from what we study every week here that there's just one power, as Marianne said so beautifully, one power that is a power for good. It's greater than we are, and we can use it. There's one essence, one origin, one creator that is God. But there's many, many, many different expressions of the one, and that's us. In unity, there is multiplicity, which doesn't separate us, except here, in our mind that stays here on the physical plane. In spirit, we know that we are all one. So my goal and my intention is to help feed us spiritually so we can get to that place where we see through the eyes of oneness. New Thought is a spiritual movement that started in the United States in the 1900s. And it's based on the universal truths that unite all religions in the mystical realm. And it's based on the ancient teachings from many traditions that knew the truth thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. Here's one of those truths, Indra's net, that's started in the Vedas, from the Vedic tradition that was the predecessor to Hinduism. And Indra's net is also a main principle in Buddhism. And it's a metaphor for this profound cosmology of life. It is created, everything is created by Indra, the god, Indra. And it's all connected, and the interconnectedness of life. There are little jewels in each one of these parts. And the jewels are the unique expressions, but they cannot be separate from the one. They cannot be separate from the whole. They cannot be separate from each other. They're all connected. Now, in the story of Indra's net, it's infinite. It goes on in all directions forever. And every one of those little jewels, even though it reflects all the other jewels, it's not just separate itself, it reflects all of them. It is always in flux. It's ever-changing. Because reality is ever in the flux of becoming. Isn't that what we agree? This is one of the basic teachings of what we base our teaching on. There is only one of which we're all a part, and we're all connected, and we're all changing. And the thought or feeling or the brightness or the dimness of one of those jewels is reflected in all the other jewels. Ernest Holmes said, we are here to have harmonious relationships, because if we don't, it affects the relationship of everything. We have a responsibility to do our best to keep our relationships whole and complete. It's not so easy, is it? To keep all these relationships in a harmonious pattern, but it comes from the inside out. Maya Angelou said, the human heart tells us that we are more alike than we are unalike. So if we learn to live from the place of our heart, that spiritual connection, it's easier to find the harmonious relationships. The mystical teachings in all faiths teach this thread of unity of which we are all part. I'm going to just give you a little example of this. Ernest Holmes said, the concept of unity is the mystical secret of the ages. It's unity. We are one, the basic teaching tenet of our principle. Howard Thurman, with whom we've talked about quite a bit lately, he's a 20th century theologian, civil rights activist. He worked closely with the teachings of Gandhi and a mentor to Martin Luther King. He said, we all belong. We long to be with each other in community. And of course, Martin Luther King, another 20th century Baptist minister and civil rights leader and a leader for so many. He talked about the beloved community is rooted in the interconnectedness of life and the unity of human existence under the guidance of a God of love and reason that's moving towards universal wholeness. Doesn't this all sound familiar, that this is all what we teach and we know? Thich Nhat Hanh, a 20th century Vietnamese monk, said, "We are all leaves of one tree. We are all the waves of one ocean. Walk as if you're kissing the earth with your feet. Everything is sacred." The Dalai Lama, a 20th century Buddhist monk, the 20th century Main Buddhist monk, said, "The habitual sharp distinction between self and others is just an exaggeration. There is a fundamental interconnectedness with all of life." Hildegard of Bingen said the same thing. She was a 12th century German Catholic saint. Meister Eckhart, this may be my favorite because tell me that we're not all brothers and sisters or connected. He said, he was a 13th century German mystic. He said, "What does God do all day long?" You've only heard half of it. God lies on a maternity bed giving birth. And of course, the only one here that only has one name, in a 13th century mystic poet, Sufi mystic poet Rumi said, "You, I, he, she, they." To mystic lovers, there is no distinction. So what's that asking us to do? It's asking us to lift our minds to the place of spirit, to be mystical thinkers, to be everyday mystics, which we can be, to change our thought to something more. But if we're going to do that, yeah, we're all connected. We all have these little threads of, these little spiritual threads of connection, these little threads of light. We get knots in our thread. It's put there by the mind. Now, you got to realize this mind we have is such a brilliant tool. We can use it to destruct. We can use it to tie knots in this thread of unity. Or we can use it to create. It's the tool of creation to create something more. We have to really be focused how we're using this mind of ours. Now, when we get knots tied in these threads of unity, these knots of separation, think of what yours is. Your knot could be, "Oh, I'm not worthy of being one with all." It could be judging others. And when we remember the people that cause suffering are suffering themselves, when we can change our mind to understand that we're all in this together, we're all in it together. So we have to realize, what are those knots that tie us off from the good that's already there, the connections that's there? These threads of light, of goodness, are threads of peace. Because you see, if these threads, if one of them is in disharmony, it's going to cause disharmony for all. And I think right now in our world, we're here. We signed up. I know we did. Really, didn't I sign up to be here at this time on the earth, on this planet right now? Did I really? I did. So did you. We're here because we are needed. The song that Doug just sang, "I need you," we're all needed to be together and unify with the spirit of oneness. That's what we're called for at this time. The time to do whatever we need to do to unknot those cords of separation, those knots. They're not cords, but they're knots that keep us separated from the good that's present right now. We don't have to go anywhere to find it. We just have to open to it. What we need, so I want you to take a little self-check right now. This might be a hard one. To keep us untied, free and open, we need flexibility. I'm just letting it settle in for a minute. Willingness to cooperate with life. Did that cause any charges for you? I'm not ready to do that. I don't want to do that. I want my way, the highway. We need to cooperate so we don't get those knots of separation that create disharmony. Undisciplined people create disharmony. Undisciplined people create disharmony. Undisciplined people who let the old habitual thought patterns that didn't work then and certainly don't work now keep running their life. Does that make sense? Undisciplined people. I have said since, I think the first time I stood on our little stage down in Mission Viejo, ways down in our little sanctuary, I said, I want these 3 words to guide your mind and your life: focus, discipline, and deliberate choice. So we make deliberate choices, and when we fall off and start going back to these old patterns, we can recognize, I choose. I'm the one. I get to choose. You see, I believe we're here for community. Community is another word for creation. If you think about it, nature is filled with little communities that are working together for good. Now, when our communities, unfortunately right now, work the best, when we're able to let go of our differences and really come together, is when there's a disaster. When there's an earthquake, a hurricane, a mass shooting, the loss of someone we really care about that's been a hero for us in some way. We drop our differences of race, religion, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, gender, whatever it is. We drop all that and we come together to help one another, right? Can you think of the times we've done that and we continue to do that, times we need each other the most, because we know intuitively that we are here for each other. We know that. We forget it in our daily life sometime. We get too comfortable in living separate lives. And what's in it for me, we forget that. But we remember, because there's something in us that intuitively knows that we are one, that we belong to each other, but we've got to practice. We've got to practice working together for the common good. We've got to learn to handle working together for the common good, and harmonious relationships don't mean that everything's always in harmony. It means we have to work at it. It means we've got to work at it. We've got to be able to step aside from what we want to listen and talk to. You know, I taught kindergarten for so long. We were always in circles, holding hands, sitting on the rug in a circle, and there was circle time. Circle time, we do that in our youth space now, where kids come together to learn about themselves, about life, about cooperation. They sit in a circle, and they have a little toy or a little talking stick or something, and one person learns to talk. It's their turn. They build confidence and self-esteem, while others are learning to listen and to care and compassion. We need to have more circle time. The teacher, the facilitator, sits down with the kids. Those little chairs have very little legs compared to my legs, but we all sat together in the circle. There's not one person who's above the others. We sit together in a circle. We need to do that. It was Albert Einstein who said, our task must be to free ourselves by widening our circles of compassion. By widening our circles of compassion to embrace all living creatures, all living creatures, and the whole of nature and its beauty. Take a minute and look at these hands. Think about when they were really little. Those little hands taught us about life. They taught us how to reach out and learn about objects and things in the world. They taught us about hugging and loving and being hugged. They taught us about nourishment and care for ourselves and others and sharing. They taught us about being in circles. They taught us about coming together. I want you to think, the beautiful reading you did this morning, Marianne, is a reminder of the teachings of Jesus. His main teaching, above all else, was love one another. And he was criticized for being with and eating with publicans and sinners. Now, that's in Ernest Holmes' book, and I wasn't sure what a publican was. It's not a republican. It's either the owner of a pub or a tax collector. So I said, okay. But he would, because he wore, either metaphorically in his mind and heart, or he actually had a robe of unity, of one cloth, just one piece. He wore that. And he symbolized it in his mind because he could see beyond the physical differences to know that we are one. Inside, we are way more alike. I was listening to this scientist talking, and she said she'd been involved, she was part of the Sikh community, and she said after 9/11, I think a few years later, someone came in because they had equated on the physical plane, everyone that wore a turban was a terrorist. And they came into the temple, the Sikh temple, and the Sikhs are probably the kindest, nicest people that I have ever met, just beautiful people. And went in and there was a mass shooting, and they thought they were terrorists, and killed 6 of the members, including the leader of that certain temple. And she was saying that the beauty of that, we could stop there and get some learning, but the Sikhs chose at that temple, with the surrounding people, it wasn't just their tradition, but they chose, instead of acting back in hatred and revenge, to come back with love. And because of that, there was a leader of the fellow who came in was a white supremacist, and there was a leader who was afraid. He saw how the Sikh community was acting, and he was afraid that one of the people he'd brought into to his group or whatever, that he might have been involved in that in some way. So he asked the son of the president that was killed to come have dinner with him. And the son did. He said it was hard. He didn't know what to expect. But they've started an organization now about coming together to heal our differences. That's what can happen when we choose to love instead of hate, when we can come together instead of reacting with anger and violence and hatred, to choose to take the high road and see the good, to see the good. So I'm going to ask us now to just join together in prayer on this day. We have so much to pray for. Let's just untangle ourselves and put our feet on the ground. Be kissing the ground with your feet. Feeling those hands that have taught us so much about life, and ask ourselves, because as Rabbi Heschel says, we are closer to God when we ask questions than when we think we know the answers. So ask, how can I widen my circle of compassion, truly knowing that my heart within me is the heart of God. The heart within me knows to love. My heart is beating at the same time as all these other hearts in the world, that truly we are together, way more alike than we are different. And as I open my heart in love, it starts with this divine love already within each and every person. And as we allow it to permeate our mind, so we have the mind of faith, our heart, so we have the heart of love, and our feet, so we have the feet of peace, that we're able, I know that we together are able to move forward and truly create the change for a better world as it starts from within. And we allow ourselves to just say, on this day, how can I widen my circle of compassion, of love, of goodness and caring? How can I generate what I need? And how can I, in my own prayers of what I want for myself, how can I include others in that too? Because in order to keep this net, this beautiful net of jewels, we know that what we desire, we must desire for all others to join with us in that same manifestation of that good that is here for us, that good of God that is manifesting right now as the light of love and the light of peace and the light of goodness, the light of wonder, the light of amazement. We know that right here together as we accept it for our own life, and we accept it for the life of every person here. we feel the connection and the unity and the oneness. How blessed we are to know this truth, and we certainly release that to the infinite mind of love. Know as it is spoken, it has been answered. We are open, we are free, we are available to all that is good and right and true. And we seal this by saying, and so it is. And may I just close with one other thing this beautiful Sikh scientist female said. She said, you know, when people ask me what ethnicity I am, I know a lot of people like to say, well, I'm half Irish, or I'm a quarter Native American. Or she said, when people ask me what ethnicity I am, I say, you know, I'm 3/4 hydrogen and 1/4 carbon. And so are you. We're in this together. God bless you all. And so it is. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.